Hey there, everyone. Welcome to The Great Retention with Camber Parker, sponsored by TheoProKnow. I'm Camber, your young professional expert and founder of TheoProKnow, where we bring you the answers you need to know about how to hire and retain the best talent, starting with the young professionals you work with. There's a lot of young professional fish in the sea, as I like to say, but how do you catch them? And what do you do once you reel them in? That's where we come in. Today, I'm excited to have not one, but two guests with me. Please welcome Tina and John Zwolinski to the show, coming to us live from Greenville, South Carolina. The story of how we met is a funny one, so I'll share that in a moment. But first, let's meet our guests. Tina, CEO and founder at skillsgapp, is a longtime entrepreneur and expert in talent and development. John, Chief Experience Officer, has an extensive background in branding and marketing and brings his skill set to the skillsgapp team. It's a lot of skills that I just said in a row, by driving relationships with partners and ensuring all product experiences are positive ones. We'll learn much more about their company and their respective roles momentarily, but I invited them to be on the show today because they are changing manufacturing and cybersecurity career awareness, access to career pathways, and corresponding soft and middle skills development into fun, engaging mobile video games for middle and high school aged youth that they love to play. So it's a lot we just covered in that intro, but you guys are doing really important things. And so after a few discussions that we've all had together, we realized that we could really tag team our efforts. And I'm so excited to welcome them to the show today. So welcome to the show, Tina and John.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, and as we talked about before, we have to mention how we all got connected, two different ways, but I was filming my just kind of promo video for YoPro last fall, I think it was, or last spring, maybe a year ago. Yeah, it was about a year ago at this point. And I was looking for somebody at the local Spill the Beans coffee shop, and I happened to bump into John. I looked for a stranger, didn't know him, and I found you, and I just said, hey, would you mind being in this video? And we exchanged cards while the photographer or videographer was getting that on camera, and we realized, I think that there might be some synergy here, and that was how we met. So you were really great to step into that. It was your first week.
First week jumping in. Tina and I had worked together for a long time, and I'd left for a bit and just came back in and said I just want to go sit downtown because I'd been working in Charlotte a lot and just wanted to get back connected to Greenville that first week, and there you were, and ended up in a video. So it's now
lucky connections, and then so many people after you and I met. You told me about Tina, and then I started hearing Tina's name all over the place, and then we got introduced, and now we're involved in the Next Innovation Center together. So Next Upstate, and as mentors, as mentees, fellow mentees.
Yes,
and I feel like we just see each other all around town. So I love the connections that have kind of brought us here, but I had to share that before we started things.
Yeah, and being in the same space to encourage each other too. That's a great thing too at Next.
Yeah, seeing you as a female entrepreneur has really helped me, and so you've almost been like a mentor to me in a way, probably indirectly, even though you're also a mentee in the program. So thank you for what you guys have done. So we're going to start first by doing a little lightning round. So just kind of a few sentences so we can jump into the meat of our discussion today. Tell us something that is not on your resume.
I'll start.
Okay.
So my first entrepreneurial experience and pursuit, I didn't know what that word meant at the time, was actually in high school. And we used to go, a friend of mine, we would go down to the GNC store, which was at the mall, and we would take the bus because we didn't have a car and we were young, and they would do a 50% off sale for weights, and they used to sell weights back in those days. And so we would haul them on the bus, take them back, and act like we were having a yard sale, put them in his front yard and sell them for 25% off. And people bought them like crazy. Like every time we did it, they got so excited because it was in the yard, and we actually made a lot of money doing that. And as I think back on it, I was like, that's kind of the first time, very unofficially,
I love
did
that.
some entrepreneurial pursuits.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I don't know where you would fit that in your resume, but you probably could fit it in there somewhere.
You could still do it.
We'll try.
Side hustle.
Great. Yeah, I love that. And what about you?
For me, it was that I went to school for accounting, which doesn't seem that shocking, but anybody that knows me, if they were to truly know that history, would be I was in graphic design, advertising, not on the accounting side. Although I know a spreadsheet, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's a great skill to have, I will say. But
it only lasted a year, I will say that.
Okay, well, you've gone on to bigger and better things, I would say. What are your favorite productivity tools?
For me, it's Trello. And ironically, we're not using that as a company right now, but we're about to switch back. So I've used that historically.
Okay.
We were using Monday.com. I just have to have lists and things organized and even ideas. When they hit me, I forget them. So Trello is my go-to.
Trello.
And going back to it.
Great.
Well, I'm old school. It's still Google Docs for me, and it's my to-do list that I have that gets me through every day and the year.
Love it. Two really great ones. Those are like selfish for me because it's like, all right, what are people doing that'll make them more productive? But I think everyone likes to learn a little tip or trick,
new
so to
app.
speak. All right, and last on the lightning round is tell us about a lesson that you learned as a young professional.
Yeah, for me, I think it was really relationships matter. I mean, I've always been a relational guy, but what I realized was that, you know, and some other mentors taught me this, that people want to know you care about them first before they care about anything you have to say to them. Like I tended to want to walk in and go, okay, if I was in charge of something, let's just go do it. But you have to back up a second and go, all right, you know, find a way to let them know that you care about them and not just to care about the things that you're asking them to do.
Right. I love that. Yeah, I mean, people can tell.
Yeah,
so being intentional about that is really important.
For me, it was seeking out opportunities or asking for the opportunity to do something. And then people would give you those opportunities. It was a real growth opportunity. It's a lot of the same word. But and we always told our interns, too, that we had working for us, like ask. Make sure you're asking. So we might be busy and forget or oversee it. So.
It's intimidating sometimes to seek out those opportunities. But again, hearing it from people that have done it helps.
Yeah.
But thank you guys for sharing that. I think it kind of sets the stage a little bit and gives people a little glimpse into who you are beyond just the workplace. But now let's talk about why we're here, Skills Gap. What is Skills Gap? Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing and why it's so important in the community.
So Skills Gap is really a play on the problem and the solution altogether. So what we're in the industry trying to solve is just this grave need for talent. It's called the Skills Gap. And so by 2030, there'll be 85 million jobs that go unfilled. And these are jobs that you do not need a 4-year degree to get into. So they're called the in-demand careers. And you started out mentioning cyber and manufacturing. And those industries in manufacturing are aerospace, automotive, life sciences, health sciences, all sorts of careers like that you could get into. It's compounded by the fact that Gen Z, our favorite generation, is not learning about these careers. They don't hear about them. So we have this gap that keeps growing where we need to fill these jobs, but the incoming workforce, where in middle school and high school right now we have 35 million of them that are making their way through, aren't aware. And if they do hear, they never hear about how to access them. So we lose them even if they do hear about it. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And so John and I, we had a branding and marketing firm before, and our work was focused on workforce and youth. And so we saw where that industry every year was, we need talent. And so we need the marketing campaign to recruit. And then the youth that was, we're not really sure what we want to do for school. And then meeting Gen Z, they, TikTok, YouTube, they teach themselves everything. So there was this like, okay, there's something here that we could help accelerate and diversify industry's efforts to recruit. And then in the end, the youth win because they can get into these careers, especially under-resourced youth that never hear about it, that there's so many opportunities around them. And then
Wonderful.
Break cycles.
Yeah. And I think people can probably tell the synergy and why we clicked when I learned about what you were doing. So how do you do it, right? You talked about the problem. What are the kind of the ins and outs of Skills Gap that make it so unique?
I would say that it's the tool itself, focusing on mobile, or, they can also work on Chromebook as well. So looking at gamifying content in a really fun way, and then reaching students where they are. We looked at, Tina mentioned, we looked at a lot of other marketing tools, and we've done all of them, and then this was a new area for us. Tina really had the epiphany watching our kids, where they are all the time. They're playing games. She was the biggest game policer in the house, and ironically now she runs a gaming company. But
that's really funny.
but having it live there and then steal some of that screen time. for something more valuable than generally what they're doing. And we call it hiding the broccoli too. So there's great content in there about STEM and about all these things, but gamifying it, I think, just really makes it a lot more accessible and interesting to them, to guide them to increase their awareness of what these pathways are that they traditionally are not aware of.
Right. And you guys kind of touched on this a little bit already. What trends are we seeing in these Gen Z workers? Obviously, social media, digital media is really critical to that. But what other trends are you seeing?
Yeah, I think the big thing that rides along with this, we have a soft skills game that we're working on now too. So we're really excited about that, because that's industry is saying that's everybody wants that and needs that.
Yeah.
And so, what I see that connects to that is I think that Gen Z really they do want to find meaning in their work. They want to be able to connect their work to their overall well-being. As a person. And I think when I was coming out, I didn't think about that a lot. It wasn't talked about a lot, but I think it's very different now. And so they want to be connected to that, and they're looking to be pushed to grow in that area. They're looking for opportunities to develop. And I think soft skills is a primary way to do that first, foundationally, and then you can layer in all these other things that our games introduce them to as well.
Great. And can you give us just an example of one of those games that people might be able to kind of connect some of the dots to what you're doing?
So maybe like Rad Lab is our life science game sponsored by SC Bio and partners, Nephron, a bunch of others, got to drop them in there. And so that game is a virtual sort of try-on of what careers are in the life sciences. There's 3 environments: manufacturing. Actually, it starts with research. So, if you think about a vaccine, you got to go in and smart kids get together and they figure out what's the science behind that. But there's a lot of non-sciencey things too that support that and roles. And then you have to make it. If you've researched and discovered it, and you have to make it. So we have a manufacturing piece. Great. And then you have to ship it. So we have a logistics environment. And so you get exposed to each of those environments. There's a lot of challenges and things you have to solve and do. And there's even some soft skills stuff that happens along the way as well, in how you interact with others in the game.
Great. Thank you. I think that was one of the most interesting points that I remember from one of our first conversations. I was like, wow, this is really cool. And this is going to make a big impact and splash in what you're doing and what the problem you're trying to solve. So thanks for sharing that. You focused your efforts on manufacturing, right? A field that is really struggling to hire young talent right now. Just from the work that I've done, that's a main area that is really seeing some challenges. But what can you tell us about the trends that you're seeing in this field specifically?
Yeah. So stigma was one of the biggest challenges, because our generation, the moms and dads here with the college kids, we remember manufacturing being dirty plants, layoffs, all sorts of things like that. Well, the industry has shifted. It's clean. It's technology. They're using, like what John has here, iPads, devices to run the plant. So it's clean and beautiful. So the shifts that we've seen over the years is where the recruiting is, okay, we do not need to have the degrees for entry level and several levels up. So we've seen that be removed, that barrier removed, which is a huge advantage for so many youth. So now you can come in and they'll train you. So you can come in right out of high school. And there are careers in South Carolina, since we're sitting here in South Carolina today, that you can start at $50,000 to $80,000 without a 4-year degree in manufacturing. Great. And then you go in, they train you, and then they'll pay for your continuing education as you identify, now that I'm here, I see something else that I'm interested in.
Wonderful.
So, how internships you can get in and you really discover what you really like. The same thing when you get into these jobs. So I'm seeing that, and then robots are really having an impact. And so, this morning I was watching the news and Amazon was sharing that 1/3 of their workforce right now has been replaced with robots. Now we're still going to need people to run the robots and all of that. But that's going to even be growing more as we start to reshore more manufacturing. Yeah. And it's exciting.
It is exciting. And that's something that, I don't have kids right now in schools, where I would imagine a lot of that's really your market, right? That you're trying to get this in front of. But talk about some of the partnerships that you've had. I know that you have companies and definitely educational partnerships, right? How are they responding to the work, and are they excited about this opportunity? I would imagine they're not hesitant, but tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, sure. So industry is excited because of the struggle that we've already talked about. They're trying to reach and trying to plant seeds really at the middle school level because those students are getting ready to pick a pathway even for high school. Should I look at CTE programs, which we didn't know a lot about, but are really critical, especially in the manufacturing fields and all. They can come out with a certification and some things that they would normally have to pay for, they can get for free.
Yeah.
So industry is excited to reach them, but education, we're doing a lot of work with them now, and they're really excited. Number one, because it's free for them.
Yep.
It's a free tool.
You mentioned that.
And it also is, it's the hiding the broccoli thing, so they can present something in a really fun way that is hard for them to have the time to do around careers and awareness and all that. Even if you think about career specialists and counselors, it just is another tool for them to add to their current kit. That's a little more scalable in some of the things they like to do. Sometimes they want to, we can do an industry tour, we can do all this stuff. Logistically, it's really hard, but this they can put in any student's hands. That's why it's on mobile. We know that 95+% of students have a mobile phone or a device or access to it and internet, regardless of their financial situation. And so it's a really easy, scalable tool to introduce them to concepts that makes their job actually easier.
Yeah.
It's not an additional thing really to do.
Yeah.
It's something that helps them do what they're currently doing.
Right.
In an enhanced way.
Yeah, so why wouldn't they jump at it? That's kind of the question I had when I first met you guys. So I think it's wonderful what you're doing. And something that you already mentioned, Tina, a little bit earlier was, by 2030, I think you said
85 million.
85 million Gen Zers. Yeah, U.S. Gen Zers. That was the
35
number.
Gen Zers, 85 million unfilled jobs.
Unfilled jobs, correct.
That's just middle high school.
Right. Yeah. So, and thank you for bringing that up because I have in my next question, we know that Gen Z and millennials also by 2030, they will make up the workforce, right? 2/3.
Yes.
So that, I noticed that number, that date. I had to kind of bring it back together. So what does this mean for the industries that you're primarily working in and how is it going to impact them?
Yeah, there's a tremendous opportunity for them with this generation because this is the generation that they need. They need them to come in, they need them to lead, so they have to work with this generation. Now, it could go either way for industry right now. They have to make a decision. Are we going to adapt our recruiting methods, our culture to meet this generation where they are? Are we going to innovate the tools and tactics we use? Training and all sorts of how they set up their work environment. So that's critical, and that can be the positive. So those that do that will be able to produce more.
Yeah.
And if they choose to keep going as they are, then they're going to have the challenge of competition. Others will be able to produce more than them. They're going to have ongoing turnover expenses to keep training talent. And then they're not able to produce and manufacture as much product. So their revenue will be decreased. So it really becomes that you have to adapt or you're going to end up spending and falling behind. So that's the decision companies are going to have to make. And some are really out front and others are, it's challenging for them to adapt.
It is. And I think that's something that almost every guest has shared is the theme of you have to be flexible as a company. You have to adapt in this changing workplace. And before the pandemic, we were always heading in this direction, but because of the pandemic, it's just expedited
it has
the problem.
sped it up.
So I'm glad you said that. I think that's the key word of this season, at least. Everyone that has sat in your seat has shared companies have to adapt. And so I'm hoping that the listeners of this show can start to kind of pick up on the messages. That's the whole point. And most of these listeners, speaking of who's actually watching the show, they are business owners or leaders looking for proactive ways to increase retention and find the best talent. How do they do that in a post-pandemic workplace? Like we just mentioned, obviously I'm probably answering my own question, but how do they do that with skillsgapp? How are they going to utilize it?
Well, I think number one, outside of even skillsgapp is just to treat them as humans and not capital. Like you hear that word a lot, human capital, and I understand why it's used, but we're human, and I think that we've always wanted that because humans are humans. But I think this generation in particular, that's just risen up in importance for them, and increasing the sense of ownership in the company's mission. If you have somebody and they don't understand directly how their work impacts the overall mission of the company in some way, they're just going to lose motivation, and then you're going to lose them. And so that's really key. And so I think in our games, what we're trying to do is introduce them to a bunch of different opportunities and pathways so that they can pick something that sort of more innately they can find meaning in. And it may be something they weren't aware of before. Like, this is fulfilling. Okay, that's step one. Step two is make sure it's a great company within that industry that does want to help you increase your sense of ownership, and you can connect your personal mission and the things you find meaningful to what the company is doing. And it may not always be, it's not a charitable thing always all the time. You just want to be able to go, look, I'm growing and I'm developing. My company sees that, and we're making t-shirts. I'm not super passionate about that, but I'm passionate about the people I'm working with and the things that I'm learning and how I'm growing and the skills that I'm adding. And I think the game is kind of early on, the first step, to open that up so you can make a better choice.
Great. Cool. Thank you so much. I think at least if I did not know anything about skillsgapp, I think in the last 20 minutes, most people can come away knowing what it is, the work that you're doing in the community, but again, how it relates to this developing this next generation of leaders. And just one of the last things that I'll ask before we wrap up, just mindful of time, we know that there's a lot of young professionals coming up. We also know that there's a lot of people in some of the experienced generations, Gen X, baby boomers, that will be leaving the workplace. What is going to be the biggest challenge? And I don't want to just assume that this industry that you're focused on is going to be hit hard by that, because some people are still staying, right? We know that the retirement age is not necessarily a set age anymore. People are staying long past that, but what are the challenges that you see with this industry in general?
Yeah, the biggest that I see is that loss of expertise. Those that have been there, that have problem solved already on things, and that understand how things are working. Now things change, and so there's adaptability, but really that mentorship possibility from that previous workforce that's been there, and then the incoming workforce, back to where we started with soft skills, learning how to communicate, how different generations think differently and can learn from each other, is so valuable. And to lose that would be, I think it would have an impact on this workforce and the manufacturing companies. So I would love to see where even if those that retire could come back as mentors, could really have an impact on communication, problem solving, teamwork, be very valuable.
Yeah, I think loss of expertise is a word or words that we probably should be talking about a lot more. And that's really the first time that question has been answered that way. So I'm glad that you shared that. We've covered a lot today.
We have.
So anything else before we wrap up that you feel like we didn't touch on that you want to share?
I would just, we touched on it, but I would just expand on that loss of expertise. For me, as I've seen it working different companies, being intentional about creating opportunities for senior people and younger professionals to get together and talk about how we work too, because those patterns are a little bit different for young people and older folks. And what we're working on is certainly important, but I think there's a little bit of tension there sometimes between generations, and there's always been. The older is always going to look down. You don't do it like we did it. Well, guess
lots
what?
of memes.
And so I think if you just take that head on, and so you don't lose that expertise for one, but also there's expertise coming up from the younger generation too, because you're going to see things very differently. Right. And so the melding of those two things together is really powerful. But it's hard to do because we're all busy, and to carve out time to be intentional about that is really challenging. It's challenging for us. We're a small company, and I know for bigger companies it is. But making that effort, I think, can be really profitable.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. Well, I think it's a great way to end the interview. Thank you guys so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it, and I know our listeners and watchers will too.
It's been fun. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Thanks again for joining us on The Great Retention with Camber Parker. Before you go, remember this. Young professionals make up nearly half the U.S. workforce today, and it's expected to jump at a rapid pace in this next decade. What will you do to help them become the next great leaders we need for the future? Join us next time for more information on how to recruit and retain your young professionals. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to your podcast. This helps others know where to find episodes about this topic, and don't forget to share with your coworkers. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.